Welcome back to another edition of the Simone NBA Show. I'm your host, Jack Simone. You can follow me on Twitter at JackSimoneNBA. You can follow Heavy on Twitter at HeavyOnSports. And you can follow all of Heavy's other links at the bar beside me on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, which you should, subscribe to Heavy on YouTube. We appreciate it very much. We're going to get right into things because the NBA news world has broken. Finally, after a month of Kevin Durant trade rumors, Kevin Durant requesting a trade from the Nets, him telling the Nets to fire Steve Nash and Sean Marks, Boston Celtics being linked with Jaylen Brown, the Toronto Raptors not willing to include Scotty Barnes, the Miami Heat being involved, Phoenix Suns, all these teams involved. It has finally come to an end without a trade. Everybody in the NBA world kind of wanted to see Kevin Durant traded, or if you're a Nets fan, you probably didn't want to see Kevin Durant traded. But from the drama perspective, from those who watch NBA as a fan of no team, you wanted to see KD traded just for the fun of it. But KD will be returning to the Nets, and the following statement was released by General Manager Sean Marks. Steve Nash and I, together with Joe Tsai and Clara Wu Tsai, met with Kevin Durant and Rich Kleinman in Los Angeles yesterday. We have agreed to move forward with our partnership. We are focusing on basketball with one collective goal in mind: build a lasting franchise to bring a championship to Brooklyn. So Kevin Durant has officially relinquished his trade request. He no longer has that request submitted. He no longer wants to be traded from Brooklyn. And in hindsight, it feels like it was always going to get to this point if you look at all the clues, right? Kevin Durant obviously didn't want to be in Brooklyn for some reason or another, but the Nets really had no incentive to trade him unless they got exactly what they wanted. And they weren't going to get Jaylen Brown because the Celtics, if the Celtics were going to trade Jaylen Brown, they would have traded him, and they didn't. Heat weren't going to trade Adebayo. The Suns maybe could have thrown together a package of Aiden, but that didn't really interest the Nets. It seemed like every time you heard of a trade package being put together for Kevin Durant, the Nets didn't really have interest in it. And at the time, it felt like, okay, they just want a really big haul. Maybe some team will break. But in hindsight, I feel like there was never going to be a trade package for Kevin Durant that would have satisfied the Nets. And it makes a lot of sense. And you can compare Kevin Durant's trade request to a lot of these other guys in recent years requesting trades, but it's really very unique. Kevin Durant's trade request, because we'll go down the line. Anthony Davis requesting a trade from the Pelicans. In the end, that really helped the Pelicans. And at the time, fans were mad at AD. He left. He wanted to go to LA, whatever. But him requesting a trade from the Pelicans during the last year of his deal, when he could have just walked at the end, helped them get a return. If AD didn't request a trade, he probably would have just left New Orleans at the end of the year, and the Pelicans would have gotten nothing. Imagine where their franchise would be now if AD didn't request that trade. They wouldn't have Brandon Ingram. They wouldn't have had Josh Hart to get CJ McCollum in that deal. They would probably still have Zion, I guess, because they won the lottery with their own pick, but they wouldn't have had Lonzo. Their whole franchise would have looked completely different. And he had leverage to request that trade because he was on the final year of his deal, and he would have left. The same thing with Kawhi, right? Like, he could have just left after that deal was done. So the Spurs traded him for DeRozan, Pirtle, and they were better because of it. They had an opportunity to keep winning for those years. They still have Pirtle, DeRozan. They didn't end up getting too much out of it. Tad Young, sure, but they got value back. Even the Donovan Mitchell trade saga, there's some value of it because that Jazz team, at least in my opinion, the opinion of many around the NBA world, the current Jazz team, or last year's Jazz team with Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, was never going to win a championship. They just couldn't get over the hump. They were slowly lagging behind the rest of the Western Conference. Golden State was better. Dallas was better. Denver was getting there to be better. The Clippers, teams were better than them. They weren't going to get over that hump. So when the Jazz traded Gobert, it signaled we are going to rebuild. And Donovan Mitchell never really requested a trade. He still hasn't, but it is just smart for them to trade him and rebuild because now that their team is worse, they have even less of a chance to win a championship. And can Donovan Mitchell be the face of a team that wins a championship? Who knows? But can he be a piece of that on a different team? Sure. The Kevin Durant trade, the Nets have a championship caliber team, and we'll talk about that in a second. The Nets have a championship caliber team with KD on the roster. They have no incentive to trade him. They don't need picks, right? Like, picks won't help them. Being bad won't help them because they traded all their picks for James Harden, which didn't work out well. But they have no real incentive to trade KD because they have the goal of winning a championship. And you heard all these things come out of Brooklyn saying they want win now players. They're not interested in picks. That's because they want to win. And there isn't a package of players you could get back for KD that would help you win more than Kevin Durant. So why trade him? So I don't think Kevin Durant was ever going to be traded in hindsight. Obviously, I did during the summer or the past month while everything was going on. But in hindsight, it seems like Brooklyn was never intent on trading Durant. And that's ended up what's happening. But the Nets do have a championship caliber roster now. Obviously, there's lots of ifs and buts that go along with that because we've seen drama get in the way time and time again. But Kyrie Irving, Ben Simmons, Kevin Durant is a championship caliber threesome. Now, I've gone on record. I said it here, I think last week, that depth is more important than star power in the NBA, but the Nets have that too. Nick Claxton as the starting center is good. They need a backup center, but they can find that. TJ Warren is there. Joe Harris is there. Seth Curry is there. Patty Mills is there. They have the depth to win a title behind this core. It's not like it's just Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, Ben Simmons, nothing else. Like the Lakers. Last year, the Lakers gutted their team for Westbrook, and it didn't work out because they traded all of the pieces that helped them win the championship 2 years prior for a star, and it failed. The Nets still have adequate depth behind their stars. They traded for Royce O'Neal this summer, right? Like Edmund Sumner joined them. Kessler Edwards is back. All these young guys. Cam Thomas could make a leap. They have the right depth. I think this is a championship caliber team in Brooklyn. And I don't think they were ever going to trade KD. And it's obviously hindsight. I'm not claiming to have known that the entire time, but in hindsight, knowing what I know now, knowing what everybody knows now, I don't think the Nets were ever going to trade KD. I think it was always a case of, let's get him back in here. Let's get him to agree to this. And I saw people tweet this. It feels like a lot like Kobe in 07. There were all these trade rumors. Kobe didn't think they could win, but they worked it out and he stayed there. Will the Nets end up winning a championship like Kobe and the Lakers did? I don't know. The East is very tough. The Celtics, the Heat, the Sixers, the Bucks, all these teams are up there, but you definitely have to put the Nets alongside those teams now, with KD remaining in Brooklyn. I know I mentioned the Donovan Mitchell thing during that kind of Kevin Durant rant. Wow, I'm a poet, I guess. Didn't know it. But Donovan Mitchell rumors have started to heat up again, specifically the Knicks, and also Danny Ainge saying that the Jazz have quote-unquote mystery offers for Donovan Mitchell from teams we haven't heard about yet. So I kind of want to go run down through the list, starting with the Knicks. Different packages the Jazz could get for Donovan Mitchell. What's best, where teams should draw the line, et cetera, et cetera. Starting with the Knicks, because the big thing is that Ian Begley of SNY reported that the team's previous stance on not wanting to include RJ Barrett in a deal has shifted, and some are open to the idea. Personally, I think giving up RJ Barrett in a deal for Donovan Mitchell is foolish. Not because RJ Barrett is better than Donovan Mitchell. I think clearly Mitchell is a better player right now. And maybe they have a better chance of winning in the short term with Mitchell. But long term, I think Barrett's a better fit for the team. You're talking about pairing Jalen Brunson with Donovan Mitchell, two defensively not great guards in the backcourt. RJ Barrett, I think, has the potential to be the next version of Andrew Wiggins. I'll put it that way. Maybe better scoring punch, maybe more of a star, maybe slightly more of that X factor, but with the defense, with the 3-point shooting, although it's been inconsistent so far, it's shown that it can be there. I think having that wing on the roster is more valuable than a 6'1" guard in Donovan Mitchell. Again, not saying Donovan Mitchell is worse than RJ Barrett or anything like that. He's clearly the better player right now, but that's where I would personally draw the line. That being said, if I'm the Knicks, I would offer Evan Fournier, Obi Toppin, Emmanuel Quickly, 5 first-round picks. Maybe you go to 6 because I think they have 8 tradable. I could be wrong on that. Don't quote me, but I would give up the picks. I would give up Quickly. I'd give up Obi Toppin. I'd give up Fournier or Rose or whatever veteran they want. At that point, it doesn't matter. But I wouldn't give up RJ. And if they do give up RJ, sure, they're pushing for the playoffs. I guess it could make sense. You hear Mark Berman of the New York Post reporting that Tom Thibodeau would prefer to include RJ over Quentin Grimes. That seems a bit crazy to me. But it is what it is. It's clear that the Knicks want Donovan Mitchell in New York, which makes sense. He's from there. The connection, it's too clear not to think about. But I wouldn't give up RJ. If they do end up giving up RJ, you've got to draw a line in the sand with the picks, because RJ and picks is a lot for Donovan Mitchell. I even think RJ is a lot for Donovan Mitchell on his own. But it's a very weird line to draw. I'll stand by my point, though, that they shouldn't give up RJ Barrett. But we won't know. We won't know until it happens. So we shall see from there. Other teams that have touched base, quote unquote, according to Begley, regarding Donovan Mitchell are the Utah Jazz. We've heard Washington Wizards, not Utah Jazz, they're trading Mitchell. Hornets, Washington Wizards, and then the Cavaliers have begun touching base with the Jazz as well, which is interesting because I think the Cavs could put together a decent package. We're talking Lauri Markkanen. Uh, After that, Isaac Okoro maybe is the start of the deal, since you already have Darius Garland and you'd be getting Mitchell. Maybe you do a Colin Sexton sign and trade if that's what they're interested in. Cavaliers could be a team to watch out for. How much Donovan Mitchell would enjoy playing in Cleveland, going from small market to small market. Eesh, I don't know. That's definitely tough as well, but they're a team to watch because they've got the pieces to make some noise in the East if they get Mitchell, especially with Garland there at the helm. Garland's phenomenal. Washington could have a package, maybe uh, Kuzma or Will Barton, and then you have Abdia, you have Hachimura, you have some young guys who you could throw in with picks to get Mitchell. And then the Hornets too. I think I talked about this a few weeks ago or a few episodes ago on this podcast about the Hornets deal for Mitchell. That's the one I would really watch out for. Danny Ainge likes Terry Rozier. They have that connection. Having him as a starting point is great. They have the picks to trade. They have young guys like James Bouknight, Kai Jones, PJ Washington, who they can throw in the deal to sweeten it. I think the Hornets is the pick trade package to watch out for, although I do think the Knicks are probably still the very overwhelming favorites to land Donovan Mitchell. And then you hear these mystery teams. What mystery teams could be out there that could land Donovan Mitchell? That is the question. Well, and I guess I'll make this a mini segment, but the one team I think could be the real mystery team to emerge as a potential suitor for Donovan Mitchell is the Toronto Raptors, because I think they have the defensive pieces around Fred VanVleet and potentially Donovan Mitchell to make the team work. I think they're already close enough in the East where they could warrant making a big deal to make that extra oomph, get that extra push for a championship contention. And they have the assets. If you offer the Jazz a package of either Trent or OG Anunoby, and then picks with whatever salary filler you need to get up there, Kem Birch, blah, 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 to get Donovan Mitchell, I think that could be very intriguing. I think that could see the Raptors shoot up in the Eastern Conference standings. I think they'd be on par with the Heat. I think they could be close to on par with the 76ers. And it's because the Raptors are very quietly always up there. You look at last season, they were fighting for the play-in, and then they just managed to get the 5 seed, right? They were the 5 seed in the East out of nowhere. So keep an eye on the Raptors. Nick Nurse is one of the best head coaches in the NBA. Pascal Siakam, all NBA player last year. Scotty Barnes, one of the most intriguing young players in the NBA. Chris Boucher, quality center. Fred VanVleet, all-star last season. Gary Trent Jr. led the league in steals. Phenomenal player. OG Anunoby, although he'd probably be in the trade, him or Trent. He's a great player. Whichever one they keep would fit well. Toronto Raptors trading for Donovan Mitchell makes a lot of sense to me. And I think they should be considered the sleeper. And I think they could be one of those mystery teams, even though it's funny to think about their being mystery teams that Danny Ainge likes the offers for. If you like them so much, Danny, you would have taken them by now. So take that with a grain of salt. But Toronto Raptors is the team I would look out for in the Donovan Mitchell sweepstakes. That hasn't been mentioned already, although I think the Knicks are still the front runner. And I think the Hornets probably have a sneaky good package too. So I'm intrigued to see where the Donovan Mitchell sweepstakes goes. All right, next I want to talk about the Boston Celtics, more specifically Jayson Tatum, and an interview he did with Taylor Rooks of Bleacher Report. A lot of interesting quotes to come out of that, a lot of stuff Boston Celtics fans would want to hear. And we'll just start with the injury. Jayson Tatum saying he was playing with a wrist fracture for most of the playoffs. And I think some Celtics fans will find some comfort in that, considering he didn't play too well in the finals. So it's nice to hear that Tatum wasn't 100% only because, he didn't look 100%. So there's some sort of excuse. But the reason I wanted to talk about it was because I don't want to see Celtics fans saying, oh, if Tatum was healthy, they would have won the finals. This explains everything. Because I think that's a crap excuse. And I always think injuries are a poor excuse for teams because they happen every year. You could go down the line of every championship ever and find a reason why they shouldn't have won and why that championship shouldn't count, blah, blah, blah. Like you look at last year, the Bucks ran into the injured Brooklyn Nets and they took them to 7 and they wouldn't have won the championship if James Harden and Kyrie Irving were there, right? And then the year before that, you look at the you look at the Los Angeles Lakers. Oh, Bam Adebayo got hurt in the finals, and the Celtics would have won if Gordon Hayward was hurt, so the Heat wouldn't even had to face the Lakers, and it was the bubble, so that shouldn't count, right? And then the Raptors in 2019. Thompson and Durant were out. That doesn't count either. So you look down the line, even the Warriors, some of their titles. Oh, Kawhi Leonard got hurt. Zaza Pachulia, Chris Paul got hurt. The Rockets would have won. There will always be excuses. And even the Celtics this year, Bucks fans saying Middleton was hurt. Bucks would have won. Heat fans saying Jimmy Butler wasn't 100%, they would have won. Even some Nets fans, even though Simmons didn't play a single game for them, saying if Ben Simmons was there, the Nets would have won. Injuries always happen. It is a part of the game, and it was a part of the reason the Celtics made the finals. There's no denying that. It was part of the reason any team ever does anything in the playoffs, because they always happen. So Celtics fans can't turn around and say Jayson Tatum, that was the reason. He was on the court, means he had to play. Although it is nice to hear he was hurt. So there's some explanation as to why he played so poorly. In addition to that, Tatum talking about how miserable he was after the finals should also be sadistically, I guess, satisfying for Celtics fans to hear in a way, because he even said it himself. I'll try to find the quote here briefly, but Tatum is a very blasé person. It's not because he doesn't care. It's not because he, it just only cares about the money or doesn't care about the Celtics or winning. It's just it's just who he is. And Tatum's quote was, "It's just tough. Sometimes I feel like sometimes I come off so laid back that I don't know if people understand how much I invest into this game, how much I care, how hard I work, because I'm not like the loudest or may show everything. But it was just so tough because I literally, gave everything that I had to feel like I ran out." And that I didn't have anything left to give, and we were so close. I didn't have an appetite. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to go anywhere. I was just in my house for 3 or 4 days straight. And then the main quote you're hearing is, "I was miserable." So to say Tatum doesn't care because he doesn't show emotions like Marcus Smart or Jaylen Brown or all these other guys around the league even is foolish. He very clearly cares, and I just don't think he is one of those guys who will always show that in a way. I think he's just very reserved. I think he's very, I don't want to say introverted, but he just doesn't like express his emotions that way. So to hear about how much he cares after the finals, about how much he couldn't eat, he was miserable, should weirdly motivate Celtics fans to root for them, and just understand that while Tatum may not show it, he does really care about the Celtics and about winning and all of that, which should have been obvious from the get-go. He's an NBA player. Of course he cares, but to hear it from the horse's mouth is nice. And on top of that, Tatum also talking about the KD picture, saying people exaggerate things. They always exaggerate whatever I do. I'm friends with KD. Of course, I'm going to work out with him. It'll make me better. He's an amazing player. Duh. I've said this plenty of times. They're friends. They're going to work out. It doesn't matter. Like that part's foolish. But the real thing that kind of went viral was Taylor Rooks saying Damian Lillard isn't a superstar, which is kind of what I wanted to talk about a little bit. First of all, I think Damian Lillard is a superstar. I think it's clear that he's a superstar. And Taylor Rooks saying, oh, well, I think he needs to do more, win a championship. My response is, what else do you want him to do? Right? Like people, crap on players for leaving their teams and abandoning their roots, but then they also turn around and say, oh, well, he hasn't won. Okay, the Blazers they've ran into the Warriors every year, and it's not like they've put an elite team around Dame either. So there's that. But more importantly, who cares? Who cares who is or isn't a superstar? Like, I could rattle off my opinions. I think Tatum's a superstar. I think Kyrie's a superstar. I think Dame's a superstar. I think LeBron's a superstar. Do I think Chris Middleton's a superstar? No. Do I think Drew Holiday is? No. Do I think Ben Simmons is? No. I have my own personal line that I think, but somebody else could turn around and say, okay, no, I think Chris Middleton is a superstar. He's won a championship. He's been a three-time All-Star at this point. He's 50, 40, 90 or close to it almost every season. That's a superstar, right? He's a crucial piece on a contending team. That's a superstar. And I don't really have an argument for him, right? Like, I could turn around and say, no, superstars, in my personal opinion, have a great impact on their team. They are the face of their franchise. They can win at a high level. They put up amazing stats. They put up MVP caliber stats. Consistent all-star teams. They do more beyond the court. And that's why I think Damian Lillard is a superstar and not Chris Middleton. But if you turn around and say, no, I think superstars are just the best of the best NBA players, consistent all-stars on contending teams. And I don't really have an argument. People have different lines. So when people go on Twitter and say, we need to really stop using the word superstar, I just kind of like, I don't get it. Like, because people will always have their own opinions. So to act all high and mighty and say, oh no, this player's a superstar, we really need to stop using that word. Who cares? It's a word, right? Like it's just a completely useless, redundant word that doesn't mean a damn thing for anybody outside of the people who care enough to use it, right? Like players don't care who's a superstar. They're making their money. They're enjoying the game. They're doing whatever they can to help their team wins, right? Like the label superstar is only in place because people who watch the game like to rank things. And so it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. And And like I said, I think it's all opinion based. I think Dame's a superstar. Taylor doesn't have to. It is what it is. I just thought that whole spin-off argument was funny because in the grand scheme of things, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And lastly, in Jack's Corner, I wanted to talk about an NBA mailbag Steve Bulpett, NBA insider for Heavy.com, did, where he talked about the Golden State Warriors because the Golden State Warriors just won a championship. They won their 4th championship in 8 years. They are one of the best dynasties in NBA history. They have 3 of the greatest players in NBA history. And yet all of the conversation seems to be around what they will do moving forward. Wiggins and Poole, Andrew Wiggins, Jordan Poole, both need contract extensions after this season. Klay Thompson and Draymond Green will need it after the next season if they decline their player options. So there's a lot of buzz around what will the Warriors do, because after they let Gary Payton II and Otto Porter Jr. walk this offseason, when they could have paid them, they would have had to pay a lot of money. It kind of showed signs of, okay, the Warriors aren't going to be willing to pay everybody anymore. And then you hear Joe Lacob talking about how we need to get rid of this tax. This is ridiculous. And he gets fined for it. It's clear that there's going to be a line drawn in the sand. But where the line is drawn is the crucial part of things. Now, Bulpett was asked if one of the Warriors were to leave, among the 3 Warriors veterans, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green, who do you think will be the first to leave Golden State? That was asked by Nate D of Rochester, New York. And Steve started. I don't see any of them departing anytime soon, so this could be a little, useless of a conversation. But he said, my educated guess would be Draymond is out the door first, because 1, Steph isn't going anywhere. He's the face of the Warriors. 2, Klay is on the books for 2 more years guaranteed, making him hard to move if they desired, and he's probably a bet to stay around as a shooter and take a pay cut, blah, blah, blah. And 3, like Klay, Draymond is 32 and has 2 years remaining. But the numbers are far more manageable, 25.8 and 27.6 on the second year as a player option. In the mind's eye, it's hard to picture Green playing anywhere else, but the Warriors, heavily burdened by luxury tax, have to be hoping one or more of their young front court types can emerge and provide meaningful minutes at a better cost. So combine that with Draymond, his comments a few weeks ago saying, I want a max contract when this deal is up. And it's looking like maybe he won't return to the Warriors. Now, I don't want to say that with certainty because there's always a chance that Steph wouldn't be happy with that. And at that point, you have to please Steph and you have to bring those guys back and then let Wiggins or Poole walk, which would be kind of a disaster if you're the Warriors planning for the future, at least in regard to that. So it's going to be an interesting situation to watch because the way I see it, if there had to be one odd man out in that 6-sum of Steph, Klay, Draymond, Poole, and Wiggins, or 5-sum, I guess, it's obviously not going to be Steph. It's not going to be Steph. Steph is the face of the franchise. He's the greatest shooter in NBA history. He's by far the best player on the team. He's not going anywhere. The other 4 is where you start to have those conversations, and you can make arguments for all of them. Draymond Green, you shouldn't pay Draymond Green a max. This isn't my opinion. This is like the argument you could make, playing devil's advocate for keeping them. You probably shouldn't pay Draymond Green a max contract at this point in his career. You can get similar value out of some of these young players like Kuminga. Maybe it's time to let him walk. Klay Thompson. Jordan Poole is already on the roster. So is Andrew Wiggins. You have shooters. You can replace his shooting production, plus the injury history. And you need to play him for the future. Maybe let him walk. Andrew Wiggins could be, he's been great, but we also have Moses Moody. We also have Jonathan Kuminga in the pipeline. If he wants a max deal, maybe we'd be better off signing and trading him, getting value while getting value back while his value is at an all-time high. And there you go. And then Jordan Poole could be, wings are more valuable. I saw this from Connor Letourneau, I think, of the San Francisco Chronicle a few weeks ago. Wings are more valuable in today's NBA. Letting go Jordan Poole, who is a score-first guard, and those are probably more common, is probably smarter than giving up Wiggins. So there can be arguments made for all of them. My personal opinion, from somebody with no Warriors bias, no connection to the team, no fandom, no nothing like that, is that Thompson has to be the one. If you're giving up somebody, I think it has to be Thompson. Now, I do think it's equally as likely that Thompson is willing to take a pay cut to stay with the team, because that seems like something Thompson would do. And I think Sean Devaney of Heavy.com wrote this as well. He seems like the type to say, I love it in Golden State. You guys have taken care of me throughout my injury. I'll take a pay cut so we can keep this team together. And if I had to make a prediction, that's where I'd put my money. I think Klay Thompson ends up taking a pay cut and all this conversation is for naught. But if you have to get rid of one, I think it has to be Klay Thompson. Because you have Jordan Poole there. He's obviously not the defender. He's not the wing player. He's nothing like that. But if you combine Poole and Wiggins together, you have Klay Thompson. As weird as that sounds, you have the shooting and scoring of Poole, and you have the defense of Wiggins and the 3-point shooting of Wiggins as well. And at Klay Thompson's age, planning for the future is important. Yes, competing now is great, but if you're the Warriors, you have to start looking at the future as well. Jordan Poole, Andrew Wiggins, James Wiseman, Jonathan Kuminga, that is your future. You have one of the best futures in the league already, even though you are already winning a championship. So I think it has to be Thompson. But like I said, I think Thompson takes a pay cut. And like Steve said, if one of them were to leave, it could end up being Green, because he might be more willing to leave the Warriors than Thompson is. He might have more suitors out there. He might be more willing to, you've heard the rumblings of, oh, Detroit could want him. He could want to play in Detroit because he's from Michigan. And he grew up idolizing Ben Wallace. That could be a possibility. You look at, the Heat. Excuse me, sorry. They could make a sign and trade potentially for Draymond Green happen. You look at other teams around the league. The Hawks can make something happen with John Collins if they wanted that defense and culture Draymond brings. There's plenty of options, and as time moves on, he could have more options in the future as teams open up with cap space. Poole will obviously have suitors. Wiggins will obviously have suitors, and if neither of those guys, I think Sean Devaney wrote this, if neither of those guys get extension offers or sign extensions during the season or immediately after, they'll probably looking at other offers. They're probably going to go around free agency and looking. And the dangerous part about letting those two guys hit the open market is most of the teams with cap space next offseason will be these young teams. You're looking at the Rockets, the Magic, the Pistons, the Pacers. All of these young teams looking to build their cores will have the cap space. And they would love guys like Andrew Wiggins, who's 27, and Jordan Poole, who's 23, I believe, at this point. So teams looking to build their young cores are going to be looking at these guys and overpaying for them. Jordan Poole could get a max contract offer. So could Andrew Wiggins, very easily. And if the Warriors don't secure them on those deals before other teams do, you never know what those guys are intrigued by. Maybe the Raptors come in Andrew Wiggins and say, hey, we want you here. Come home. We'll work out a sign and trade deal with Anunoby or something. And Wiggins is like, yeah, I want to go to Toronto. That's where, I'm from, Canada. Why not? Maybe the Magic or Pistons or Pacers see Jordan Poole and say, hey, we want you part of this young core. We'll give you a larger role. We'll let you be the star of the show alongside Paolo or alongside Tyrese Halliburton or alongside Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey. Or the Rockets even in Jabari Smith and Jalen Green, and Jordan Poole's like, yeah, I'll be the star of the show. We can build something here. And the Warriors are just left in the dust. So if you're the Warriors, you have to get on that. And it's really going to become a decision of, if Thompson doesn't take that pay cut, which I think is probably the route that happens here, or Green too, but it's sounding like Green isn't going to take a pay cut, and Wiggins and Poole shouldn't take pay cuts at this point in their career. If Thompson doesn't take that pay cut, it's looking like they could have a tough decision to make between old guard and new guard. And I'm really intrigued to see how it plays out, but we'll see. Maybe Joe Lacob will just complain his way into getting more luxury tax relief. So we shall see. But watch out for the Warriors, Klay, Jordan, Andrew, and Draymond. Things could get dicey in Golden State. And that'll be it for this episode of the Simone NBA Show. Thank you guys so much for listening. We appreciate it. I appreciate it very much. You can follow me on Twitter at JackSimoneNBA. And obviously, show sponsored by Heavy. Thank you to Heavy. Follow them on Twitter at Heavy on Sports. Check out the YouTube. Subscribe to Heavy on YouTube, and you can see all the links here to my left, right, on the side of the screen. You'll see it if you're watching here. But yeah, we appreciate it. Make sure you're on Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star rating, leave some nice reviews if you like me. And if you don't, leave a bad one. If you don't like me, let me know. Make sure to follow the show on Spotify so you can get it when all the new episodes are out. And yeah, appreciate you guys for listening. Peace out.